Every night, when the clock strikes midnight, the stories awaken. Whispers in the walls, shadows at the window, footsteps in the dark, voices calling from the places we fear the most. This is where the haunted speak and where nightmares live. Welcome to the Haunted Hour. Subscribe if you dare. In 1986, a teenage girl called 911 in absolute hysterics. She told the dispatcher there was a man living in her walls. At first, police didn't believe her. They assumed she was traumatized, maybe grieving, maybe even hallucinating. But when they arrived and searched the house, they found something that not only proved her right, it left officers physically sick. This is one of the most disturbing home invasions in American history. And somehow, it only gets creepier the longer you look into it. In 1986, the Andrews family lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Pepperell, Massachusetts, one of those small New England towns where nothing ever really happens. Frank Andrews, a hardworking, no-nonsense dad, was raising two teenage daughters. Annie, 15, and her younger sister Jessica, 13, all by himself. Their mother had passed away just a year earlier from cancer. By all accounts, the girls were dealing with the grief as best they could, especially Annie. She was shy, quiet, and kept mostly to herself. But right after their mother's death, strange things started happening inside the Andrews home. One night, a few months after the funeral, Annie and Jessica were playing around with a Ouija board in the living room. You know, the kind you find in a toy aisle at a Walmart. At first, it was just silly fun. But then they asked the board, "Is our mom here?" The planchette moved slowly, but deliberately to yes. At the time, the girls were more comforted than scared. They believed their mom might still be watching over them. But after that night, things inside the house took a sharp turn. Over the next few weeks, the girls started hearing knocking sounds on the walls. Tapping, scratching, whispering. They told their dad, but Frank dismissed it. He was a strict, skeptical guy who didn't believe in that paranormal crap, as he called it. But then, objects in the house started moving. Chairs would be in a different place when they came home. Family pictures were flipped upside down, and in one terrifying instance, a mirror had the words, "I am in your room," written in what looked like blood. Frank blamed the girls, maybe a prank or a cry for attention, but neither Annie nor Jessica confessed, and they were just as shaken. Things escalated on January 11th, 1987. Frank and the girls had gone out for dinner. When they returned, the house was dark and eerily quiet. Frank went upstairs to investigate and stopped dead in his tracks. On Annie's wall, in red writing, were the words, "I'm still here. Come find me." Frank, thinking it was Annie acting out, got angry. But before he could yell, he heard a loud crash in the basement. He ran downstairs, and what he found would unravel their lives. There, standing in the middle of the basement, was a teenage boy wearing his deceased wife's wedding dress. He had a full face of white makeup, lipstick, and was holding a hatchet. The man stared at Frank and then ran. The police were called immediately. They searched the house and found that the boy had disappeared into the walls. Literally. After tearing apart parts of the paneling in a hallway closet, they discovered a crawl space behind the walls. And inside it, a makeshift bed, food wrappers, and a small collection of women's clothing. The boy had been living inside their house for weeks, possibly months. His name was Daniel LaPlante, and what investigators found next would confirm this was far more than a haunting. It was the beginning of a terrifying true crime spree. Daniel was 17. On paper, he was just another troubled kid from a broken home. But Daniel had a history: arrest records, psychiatric evaluations, and disturbing behavior stretching back years. He'd broken into homes before, but not to steal. He'd move items around, leave unsettling messages, and sometimes just watch the homeowners without them knowing. And in the case of the Andrews family, he took it to a new level. It turned out Daniel had actually met Annie months earlier. He called her pretending to be a friend of a friend. The two talked over the phone a few times and eventually agreed to meet. But when Annie saw Daniel in person, she got a bad feeling. He was nothing like he claimed. She cut off contact. Daniel did not take it well. Just a few months after being arrested for breaking into the Andrews home, Daniel LaPlante was released on bail. And what happened next was beyond anything anyone expected. In December 1987, less than a year later, Daniel broke into a home in Townsend, Massachusetts. Inside lived Priscilla Gustafson, a 33-year-old pregnant woman, and her 2 young children. Daniel raped and murdered Priscilla, then drowned her 5-year-old daughter and 8-year-old son in 2 separate bathrooms. He was caught 2 days later, hiding in a dumpster. To this day, the story of Annie Andrews is one of the most disturbing examples of a crime that feels like a haunting, but was horrifically real. The idea that someone could be living in your house, watching you, moving around when you sleep. It's not a ghost story, it's real, and it happened. If you like this story and want more real cases that are somehow more terrifying than fiction, hit the like button, and maybe sleep with your closet door closed tonight. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there. Subscribe and step back into the haunted hour, if you dare.